Okay, so the Federal Reserve just changed how they measure inflation, and I want you to understand exactly what that means, because this is one of those things that sounds like a boring technical detail, but it actually affects your money, your mortgage, your savings, and your cost of living in a very direct way. Guys, here's the situation in plain English. The Fed has been trying to get inflation down to 2% for years, and they keep falling short. So now, under the new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, who was confirmed by the Senate on May 13th, in the most divisive Fed confirmation vote in history, the plan appears to be changing the formula used to measure inflation rather than actually bringing inflation down. Now, I ask that you stay with me through this entire video because at the end, I'm going to show you what the different inflation measurements actually say right now and what that gap means for your wallet. Because guys, that's the number that matters most, and it's the one nobody is putting front and center. Okay, so let's start with the actual numbers, because this is where it gets eye-opening. Right now, there are essentially 3 different inflation readings floating around depending on which measurement you use. And they all tell a very different story. The M2 money supply, which is basically the total amount of money in existence, has been growing at a rate of about 6% year over year in 2026. If you measure inflation the straightforward way, by asking how much more money exists this year compared to last year, you get roughly 6%. That is the broadest and most honest reflection of what's happening to the purchasing power of your dollar. Then you have the CPI. That is the Consumer Price Index. And that came in around 3.8% for the month of April. And with May expected to come around even higher, maybe around 4.2% or more. And guys, the CPI is already a flawed measurement because it allows substitutions. Meaning if the price of one item is rising too fast, then they can just swap it out for something cheaper in the calculation to make the number look better. And then you have the Fed's previously preferred gauge called Core PCE, which strips out food and energy entirely, and it currently sits at around 3.2 to 3.3%. And again, let me remind you, none of these numbers are at 2%. And remember, that's what the Fed stated that they would try to target. Unfortunately, we're not even close. And now with Kevin Warsh leading the front, there's a 4th number being introduced, and that is the trimmed mean, which came in at 2.3%. And that conveniently puts inflation almost exactly at the Fed's target. And guys, I'm going to keep it simple for you. When you can't hit the goalpost, moving the goalpost is apparently an option now. So, with that being said, let's talk about what this whole trimmed mean calculation actually is, because Warsh has been very public about preferring it, and it's important to understand what it is, what it does, and what it deliberately leaves out. So, during his Senate confirmation hearing, Warsh told lawmakers that the current inflation data is, in his words, quite imperfect, and that the Fed should be using trimmed averages to better understand the underlying generalized change in prices in the economy. So again, here's how the trimmed mean actually works in plain English. Every single month, the price change of every spending category gets measured. Then, the most extreme price changes on both the high end and the low end get removed from the calculation, basically trimmed out. And then you calculate the average of what's left in the middle. And using that method, while headline PCE rose to 2.8% over the past 12 months ending in February 2026, and the core PCE excluding food and energy, which rose to 3%, the trimmed mean came in at just 2.3%. That's nearly a full percentage point difference, and it conveniently lands right at the Fed's 2% target. So now, here's the problem that even Wall Street analysts are raising. Warsh's preferred trimmed mean method involves dropping the most extreme price changes from calculation, such as the oil price shocks from the Iran conflict, and that's just to get what he calls a more accurate read on whether prices are broadly rising. But guys, those oil price shocks are not theoretical. They are what real Americans are paying at real gas pumps right now. Critics say that this is like moving the goalposts, particularly at a time when a new chair is taking over under political pressure to cut rates. Now guys, before I continue with this video, if you're gaining any value right now, please do me a favor and smash that like button, comment down below, and subscribe. Your support really helps this channel grow, so I'd really appreciate it if you could smash that like button, leave a comment down below, and subscribe. Alright, now let's talk about the political reality sitting underneath all of this, because it matters for your understanding why this formula change is happening right now and not at some other time. Trump was relentlessly pushing Jerome Powell to cut interest rates, publicly calling him names, demanding lower rates, and even having the DOJ launch an investigation against Powell, which was widely seen as a direct intimidation attempt. And guys, Powell refused to cut. And now he's out. Warsh is in. And the expectation from Trump is very clear. Lower the rates. And the reasons Trump wants lower rates are real and legitimate and on their face. Lower rates stimulate economic growth. They help the labor market and they help the housing market. And even more so, they critically make it cheaper for the US government to service its enormous debt load. Lower rates reduce the interest expense on trillions of dollars of government borrowing, which matters a lot when you're carrying debt at the scale that the US government is carrying. But here's the box that Warsh is sitting in. Inflation is running at 3.8% on CPI, expected to hit 4.2% in May, and it's still rising. And driven by surging oil prices from the Strait of Hormuz disruption, obviously it makes matters worse. Cutting interest rates into a rising inflation environment is textbook bad monetary policy. It adds fuel to the fire. So the trimmed mean calculation, which strips out oil shock and produces a reading of 2.3%, becomes the justification. If inflation looks like it's near the 2% target on the new formula, then rate cuts become defensible on paper, even if your actual grocery bill and gas bill are screaming at you otherwise. So now let's look at what the market itself thinks is going to happen, because this is where it gets really interesting in my opinion. The CME Fed Watch tool, which tracks what futures markets are pricing in for Fed rate decisions, is telling a very different story from the political narrative around rate cuts. At the upcoming June 17th meeting, which will be Warsh's very first as a Fed chair, there is a 98.6% probability that rates stay exactly where they are today. The market is essentially saying there is a zero chance of a cut at that first meeting. And then at the later upcoming July 29th meeting, the overwhelming majority, 92.4%, expects no change either. But here's the number that really jumps out in my opinion. There's a 6.3% probability priced in that the Fed actually raises rates by July. And when you look all the way out into the future of December 9th of this year and the meeting that's going to happen that day, which will be the last Fed meeting of 2026, markets are currently assigning a 54.3% probability that rates will be higher by year end than they are today, ranging from a quarter point increase all the way up to a full percentage point or even higher, and only a 0.6% chance of rates being lower by year end. So guys, the market, with all of the information available, is saying there is more than a 50% chance interest rates go up this year, not down. That is a direct contradiction of what Trump has been demanding, and it puts Warsh in an almost impossible position with his first decisions as the most powerful central banker in the world. So guys, as I wrap up this video, let me bring all of this together with what actually matters so that it makes sense to you as you end this video. What does any of this mean for your financial life right now? Here's the reality. If Warsh adopts the trimmed mean as the Fed's new North Star and uses it to justify rate cuts, the short-term effect might feel good. Borrowing gets cheaper, housing markets get a small boost, markets rally, etc. But you are cutting rates into an environment where real inflation, by any honest measure, is running at 3.8 to 6%, depending on how you count it, and where oil prices are still elevated and threatening to go even higher. That combination historically produces a very, very ugly outcome. More inflation, a weaker dollar, and higher prices on everything you buy. If Warsh holds rates steady or raises them to actually fight inflation, Trump is going to be furious and markets could get rattled and the economy continues to grind under the weight of high borrowing costs. It'll be chaos. And if he does nothing and just lets the economy degrade, the labor market keeps weakening and the government's debt situation gets even worse. So guys, there's no clean path here. What this means practically for you is this. Do not count on the interest rate relief to solve your financial challenges anytime soon, because the market is telling you there probably isn't any coming this year. Build your budget around today's interest rate, not the one that you're hoping for. Watch that trimmed mean number closely when it gets updated, because if it starts creeping up despite stripping out the outliers, even that option disappears. And understand that when a government changes the way it measures a problem instead of fixing the problem doesn't just go away. It just becomes harder to see it until it's impossible to ignore. Guys, I want to thank you for watching this video all the way through. If you gained any value from this video, please smash that like button button, leave a comment down below, and subscribe. And please let me know in the comments below what you think about this formula changing right now. I genuinely want to hear your take on this one. Thank you again for watching this video all the way through. I'll see you guys in the next video.